Recording in progress.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our event. Let me introduce myself. My name is Sandeep Saling Roy. I'm Senior Advisor and the Global Lead for Adaptation Program for Climate and Energy Practice. So, and good morning, everybody from Somerset at COP27, and those who are online and either in Myanmar or any other part of the world. And good afternoon. So today we are having our side event on empowering indigenous people and local community to set and achieve more ambitious climate target in Myanmar. So once again, welcome everyone. But before going into the detail, there are some housekeeping rules I really want to highlight over here, especially referring to Myanmar's sensitive situation and the need to support the safety and the security of the speakers. So due to the challenging operating context of Myanmar right now, and to best ensure the safety of all speakers returning to Myanmar, we will be no referring to the political context of the country in this session. Our audience, both online and in person here, we are asked to bear this in mind when you make comments or asking any question. We have an audience here in person as well as in online. For those joining on Zoom, closed caption in Myanmar language are available. So please select those options if you like, if you would like it. Also for those joining via Zoom, a colleague will collect the question posed and feed those questions through to me. So please put your question in Q&A function. So with that housekeeping role, let me briefly talk about the brief descriptions of our event. Amid multiple challenges, Myanmar indigenous peoples and local communities, the IPs and the LCs, are more committed than ever to take responsibility for achieving ambitious climate target. Although not included in the development of Myanmar's first nationally determined contributions or INDCs, as IPs and LC want to have the opportunity to set more ambitious targets and to be empowered to achieve them. There is a need for subnational climate targets and international support. So today you will hear directly from Myanmar's IPs and LCs in this session, sharing what they have been doing on the ground on every day for climate change mitigation and adaptation, and the obstacles they need to overcome and how best to best support their work. So with that brief introduction of the event, I would really like to introduce the structure of this session and also like to introduce the speaker. So firstly, there will be, in terms of the structure, there will be opening remarks, followed by a Q&A with the speaker. Then we open the floor, either in person or in virtual, those who are attending for any Q&A, and we will take those Q&A moving forward. So on that structure, so today I have a very esteemed panelist. So our first speaker is Rurik Marsden, who is the Charge C Affairs at Interim and the Development Director of British Embassy in Yangon. The second speaker is Now E. Min. She is Director of Promotion of Indigenous and Nationals Together, in Myanmar. She is a caring indigenous woman from Asia. She represents the Mekong sub-region to the Executive Council of Asian Indigenous People Pact, or AIPP. She is also one of the indigenous people representative to the major group facilitating community to the UNEP for the past 2 years. Our third speaker is Hadao. He is the coordinator of POINT Myanmar. Now he is a Kachin indigenous people and graduate from University of Forestry and Environmental Science in Myanmar. He is currently working as a program coordinator in POINT, conducting research and the advocacy work related to the environment, climate change and indigenous people issue. And Last but not the least, we have Dr. Pisho. Pisho is the Conservation Director for WWF Myanmar. He has more than 14 years of experience working in the field of biodiversity and nature conservation in Myanmar, both from the government and the NGO sector. At present, he leads WWF Myanmar Conservation Program, and he has been promoting the inclusive conservation and community-led nature-based solution project in Myanmar. So I'm really pleased to invite you all as a panel, and I would really invite the opening remarks, and would like to invite His Excellency Chargé Affairs of Interim, the British Embassy of Yangon, His Excellency Mr. Rurik. So Your Excellency, you have the floor for the opening remarks.
The great town quality quite poor. Am I supposed to? I think I probably am. So good morning. My name is Dr. Rurik Marsden. I am the Development Director at the British Embassy in Yangon. And I would like to thank WWF for organising this important event. And I'm delighted I can see there are Myanmar panelists on the stage in Sharm el-Sheikh. I'm sorry that I'm not there, but I'm very pleased to be able to join remotely. The UK's primary focus in Myanmar, following the 2021 military coup, is to support the efforts of the people of Myanmar to find a pathway to a stable, peaceful and inclusive future, and to stand by Myanmar's most vulnerable at a time of suffering and crisis. But we also recognise that Myanmar is one of the world's most climate vulnerable countries. Vulnerability, political, humanitarian and economic crisis unleashed by the coup. Myanmar is a country rich in natural resources. About 40% of the country's land area is covered by forests, almost 28.5 million square hectares. And these forests are home to incredible biodiversity, including both tiger and Asian elephant populations. But Myanmar's forests are rapidly being lost, with the third highest rate of deforestation, forest degradation globally. This is devastating diversity, but it's also undermining the resilience of natural ecosystems and the communities who depend on them. Myanmar ranks as one of the countries most affected by the impacts of climate-related disasters for the period 2002 to 2021, with all reputable local communities suffering the most from extreme weather events. The impacts of climate change are likely to become a greater burden for the people of Myanmar, adding to the challenge of the many who are already vulnerable, including the 4 million people who are currently displaced within the country and the approximately 14 million people who are judged by the UN to be in need of humanitarian assistance. The crisis created by the coup has also increased the pressure on natural resources. As well as significant internal displacement, there has been an increase in natural resource extraction, forest fragmentation, and the depletion of ecosystem services. Forests could contribute a meaningful percentage of the cost-effective climate mitigation required to try to reach the Paris Agreement temperature target. Yet the world is losing its forests at an alarming rate, including and perhaps even especially in Myanmar. Myanmar's first nationally determined contribution draft was completed in 2020, but there has been little or no implementation of the plans. However, it's really clear that Indigenous people and local communities are an integral and indivisible part of protecting Myanmar's forests. Without including Indigenous peoples and local communities, who are the historic guardians of many areas of forest, Myanmar will not meet its climate commitments, and the numbers in the NDC will remain simply as numbers. The engagement of communities in developing and implementing climate actions at a local level is critical. At last year's COP, civil society organisations from Myanmar flagged that they required direct support from international actors to increase climate resilience and to elevate the role of Indigenous people and local communities in formulating and delivering these actions. The UK committed to working with local communities and civil society to build climate resilience and to help improve forest management, equitable land tenure, natural resource governance, and environmental conservation. And we believe that this is work that can continue even in the current context. But it raises critical challenges and questions, including, for example, working out how we can best support existing customary approach and tenure, and how we can best help communities to build inclusive governance of natural resources and execute transparency, accountability, and decision making. Work to protect Myanmar's forest not only benefits the communities living in the forest areas, it also helps to reduce the vulnerability of communities who live downstream, and it contributes to tackling climate change globally. We will hear today about the determination of Indigenous people and local communities in Myanmar to set ambitious targets and to make contributions towards climate mitigation and adaptation. Equally importantly, we will also hear about how they think we could be doing more and better to support them to do this. I'm sure the panel will generate a range of exciting and interesting ideas and suggestions for ways in which the international community can help Indigenous people and local communities in Myanmar to respond to the challenge of climate change. I'd like to finish by thanking once again WWF, the panelists, but also all of the participants in this important discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, and thank you so much for your remarks. And really appreciate your time and effort to us. So moving forward now, I would like to come to our panelists now, Min. So what are your organization and the CSO leaders engaged in national level climate change issues doing in Myanmar at this time, and why?
Yeah, thank you very much. Ugomumu, good morning to you all. I'm very glad to be part of this panel to share about what we have been doing at the national level so that we can link up to the international level. For Indigenous people, we have been playing an important role in taking care of natural resources as the good stewardship and as a custodian of the natural resources that we rely on in our daily life. So at the moment, for us, civil society organization, we are trying to build resilient because of many challenges faced for the community upon the adaptation, mitigation, and loss and damage sector that the Indigenous community have facing challenges. So Indigenous people, they are playing important role for adaptation of climate change impact that facing in their daily life, and we are building resilience and strengthening their role in this sector, especially in food security, because there are many agricultural sector, especially Indigenous people way of shifting cultivation. They are also facing from climate change impact, and they need to adapt to. However, they are also the one who can protect the biodiversity, the rich biodiversity that have in the shifting cultivation area of all the native seed and preservation of all of the important biodiversity in their cultivation area. So in terms of adaptation, at the same time, they can also take care of their livelihood as part of their adaptation. Another thing is on mitigation. Indigenous people have been taking care of the forest that they value as like a supermarket for them. And then for the forest to keep alive is not as a job, no, it's part of their way they live. So they are taking care of the forest even amid the crisis they face, and we are trying to build resilience in a way they can continue doing those important role at the community level. Another thing is the loss and damage. Climate is an emergency stage. We have less than 7 years to act on, and we are very much important time to work on it and no one left behind. So even our country faces with many challenges. We are there facing with loss and damage, and we need to be able to overcome those challenges. In that, we need to build our resilience as well. Indigenous people, this year we are facing with a reduced crop because of the climate change impact. At the same time, a lot of flooding happening. Although there is no media coverage in that sector, we are facing that, and we have to prepare in a way that we can overcome. At the same time, playing an important role that we have for the thing that we are facing. And then another important thing is that indigenous people, they have indigenous knowledge, which is very much important to contribute as part of this local community and indigenous people platform, where there is space at the COP and also a need to contribute with the knowledge. So for us, we are trying to document the indigenous knowledge of the people in terms of their natural resource management, their land management, the traditional medicine they have, and how do they take care of the forest while doing those livelihood that they rely on. All of those important knowledge in relation to those that can contribute to climate change. Without documentation, we will be lost our important knowledge when facing with different pressure on us. So we are doing documentation, which is called like community protocol in different part of the country at the moment, so that we can also link up our local knowledge that can contribute to climate change, reach up to the international level platform like this LCIP platform. And also, the current country, NDC, has very limited space for indigenous people and the role they can contribute. However, indigenous people, they also have their view and concern on the way they want for this NDC. So we are also in a preparation that what kind of NDC we want for the future country respond to climate action. Another thing is like for indigenous people, we are yet very visible, although we have very important role that we play. That's why we are engaging like this at the international level. Also, before engaging, we are preparing in a way that we collect all the voices and discuss and consult with the IP leader so that we can raise the voice of indigenous people from the grassroots level up to the international level. We always make sure that we prepare a link between what is happening at the international level is also linked back to community level. Not one way. Means that before we come here, we discuss and consult with the community leader and all their situation and bring the voices here. At the same time, if we go back, we share all the thing, all the progress happened at the COP, things that international level indigenous people are doing together, so that they also are strengthened and encouraged in a way that we are working together with the international community for this important issue of climate change and the action needed to be taken. So by all this way, we are keeping trying with all our effort to keep indigenous people from our country and can continue link up to the international level, and we are not left behind for this important action needed for the war. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for all the great work that you are doing back home. So now I really like to come to Hadao. In terms of what is the reality of the indigenous people in Myanmar at this current time? Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, thank you very much for giving me a floor. Yeah, actually, 75% of the country's population are in the rural and the mountain area, and most of them are indigenous people, where most of their territory have been covered by the forested area. Currently, millions of indigenous people and local community of the country are struggling regarding to climate change and the COVID-19 pandemic's consequences and the unique situations such as food security, health problem, land issue, and internally displaced person. There are millions of internally displaced person because of the nature disaster and the conflicts. All of the countries, state, and regions are experiencing the rise of temperature. As a consequences, they have reduced yield from the crops and paddy field. Animals and vegetables are dying without being aware of the diseases, and shortage of water resources for the agriculture. The reduced rainfall severely is impacting the water security and sources of livelihood for indigenous people, and they are threatening the security and the health of the community. However, the floods occur every year in the country. There are many the amounts of densities of loss and damages are threatening the food security, the local community livelihood, and including in indigenous people and their income. So before that, we have kind of pre-COP workshop session had happened in last month. Here are some cases that came out from the workshop. For example, in the case of Kachin State, which is the northern part of the country, the floods and excess rainfall perished the paddy field of the indigenous people very extremely, and including the extreme temperature that is leading the spread of unknown diseases and happen the casualty to the domestic animal. In summertime, there's serious drought being experienced, especially this year. Thousands of paddy fields in Myanmar township or in the Kachin state is being destructed by the millions of mice that was once happened 70 years ago, which is reported by the local indigenous people. And another thing is the indigenous people from southern Shan state report that there exists rainfall in certain area, but in some area there's very little amount of rainfall. The water security and access to clean water is now becoming challenging for their survival and their life. The local people are now very concerning about the water security at the regional level. At the same time, the deforestation in grassroots level is uncontrollable at this moment, and it has been pressuring the livelihood and survival of the local community, indigenous people in that area. Then another thing is the Gebel indigenous people from Dangmu district. Yes, thank you. District reported that timing of rainy season is being reduced, and during the rainy season there exists amount of rainfall, and the experience of earthquakes and storms are quite often compared to the past decade, which is reported by the indigenous elder from Gebel Karen community. And the last, not the least, it is being reported that reduced yield in paddy field of Karen community in the Sritangwidong village of Pagoyuma region owing to the severe snow and increase of pests that are destroy the huge amount of the paddy field. Yeah, this is what really happening at the ground level. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think you really lay in terms of what's happening there. So again, now I would really like to come to maybe Win, in terms of what challenges are the indigenous people in Myanmar facing now. So can you have highlighted a little bit in the earlier statement, but can you highlight a little bit more on that part?
Yeah. We are, as mentioned, as an overall, we are facing with climate change impact severely. We are very much prone to natural disaster, and we are facing different impacts from climate change. At the same time, climate change action, sometimes initiated, are also threatening the way we live. For example, shifting cultivation practices that we value, that we can keep the biodiversity of seed and all the important seeds we have. But this practice is not acknowledged, and their land are their land title are not acknowledged, and as an overall, sometimes for the sake of those climate change action that forest area are protected and certain area are taken from indigenous people, land, territory, natural resources are taken as part of climate action. And although our country is one of the country voted in favor of UN DRIP, FPIC is not yet in place. When there is certain action that has impact on our community, there is no EPIC and there is no consultation, there is no information. We are just have an impact from those action, either development project or the climate action happen in our region and in our community level. And with the increasing pressure from all aspects, we are also facing with threat to our livelihood, the way we live. At the same time, even for food security, and that there are ongoing pressure to the livelihood of indigenous people as a whole. And in our country, we all know that there is overall instability, which is very much at the area. Those instability happen at the area of indigenous people in most part of the country, and people are struggling, and that's from all pressure, and that's is the biggest challenge happening at the country as well. And in terms of all the initiative happening on NDC and all the global process related to indigenous people, as an overall for the whole of indigenous people community in our country, we have very limited awareness because there is like no information open up for us to know what are the commitment of the country and what are the things happening at the national level that will bring up to the from international to national, what will happen in the indigenous people area, what are the plans there, things like that. We have very limited awareness. That's why we need to continue working on this awareness raising, because lack of information is also one of the challenges for us, because we are not prepared when things are become chaotic and when things are become a crisis for us. Another thing is like indigenous environment human rights defender, they are really working hard to overcome the different challenges, but there is a threat to them as well. There is an ongoing threat, and there is a need for protection of them so that they can continue playing the important role that they have for them. But at the moment, it's a big of challenges that a lot of protection is needed and a lot of threat is there for them. So these are the challenges faced by indigenous people in our country as a whole. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for highlighting those challenges. I think we can definitely feel that pain as well. So, and now moving back to again for the questions, I really want to asks, what are the recommendations from the indigenous people on climate change issue? So can you highlight a little bit more on that part?
Thank you very much. What I'm going to present is the output recommendation from the workshop that we have done last month. So, as I already mentioned, that there are millions of indigenous people and local community has been experiencing the consequence of climate change and the conflicts, including the internally displaced person. They have been living in the tent and camp with many social and health issue. That's why the urgent humanitarian support really required for the community, where the consequence of climate change, including the COVID, and in the conflicted area. Another thing is scientifically proof, evidence-based assessment and research are needed to mainstream what the consequence of climate change are faced by the indigenous people at the local level or at the grassroots level in order to mainstream the international support agency and other alliance national and local CSO member to prove that climate change is happening right now and people are suffering. And there should be different mitigations and adaptation approaches or measure for climate change at the regional and the community level planning are required for the different states and different regions are facing definitely the different climate change related issue and challenges. And there should be more awareness raising, and it is needed for the public, including the different authority. I mean that authority means the people who have the power to help the people at the local level. And they should be aware of the climate change consequence and respect and recognize the rights of indigenous people and local community in their different policy, legal framework, procedure, and action plan. Traditional livelihood system, method, and practice for which they have been practicing for thousands of years, and these should be promoted and protected, for they have been, experiencing the climate change pressure, social pressure, livelihood pressure, health pressure for many years. Without their resilience, they cannot stand today at the moment. And there should be development of the community protocol, which is very important to protect and document the traditional practice and value are being recorded, which is done by the indigenous community, and conserve area, which is we can call ICCA, of the indigenous people while respecting the rights of indigenous people, which is free, prior, and informed consent. I've picked should be which is mentioned in the United Nations declarations on the rights of indigenous people, which should be respected by all of the stakeholders. And the last, not the least, that indigenous people and local communities should be easily access to climate-related funds, which should be very dedicated for the indigenous people and local community, and they should get the right funding, which is very important to be able to struggle and to be able to fight back and resilient the climate change issue consequence and the social issue. The last thing I would like to highlight is, yes, of course, there's no one should be left behind. Of course, the indigenous people of Myanmar should not be left behind, no matter whatever they are, what the political or what is the social conflict happening at the moment. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. And definitely, as the UN General Assembly said, no one needs to be left behind. So I think that's a very good point. So now moving forward, I really like to remind the audience in the floor as well as the audience in the online. Please put your question in the chat. Be ready with the question if you have any, and with the caveat that we explained in the earlier session. So next one will be the Q&A session. But before going over there, I really want to come back to Dr. Piso regarding how can the international, I would say, organizations like WWF and others best support the work of IPLC, the civil society organization in Myanmar, to achieve the ambitious climate target at this particular point. So, Dr. Peace, over to you.
Thank you very much, Sandeep, for the question. So, before going straight to your questions, I would like to echo a little bit what our speaker has mentioned about the current challenges that the people in Myanmar are facing, and as well as the important roles of indigenous people and local community in achieving the climate targets. So as you know, Myanmar is one of the highest climate affected country in the world, and stay one of the country which has a high vulnerability against the climate change. And we have been facing a series of natural disasters in the last decade. And as you have heard from our speaker, that the indigenous people and local communities are the ones suffering most from this climate challenge. And another point I also would like to highlight is about the country. So for your information, Myanmar, we have more than 54 million people in the country. And within that 54 million, there are more than 135 different indigenous ethnic groups in the country. So the 135 indigenous ethnic groups, they have been living more than two-thirds of the country to the land area. So that gave us a huge opportunity to include the indigenous people and local community in this climate change movement. But on the other hand, the current national NDC process doesn't include the role of the indigenous people or rarely reflect the need and challenges of indigenous people. So let me give you an example. If we look at the current NDC, there's only 5 times that indigenous people is mentioned in the 100 pages long document. Only 5 times mentioned. And that doesn't indicate anything about the role of the indigenous people. That doesn't indicate anything about how they can contribute to this climate change movement. It only mentioned briefly about the impact that the current development progress can have to the indigenous people. So we need to improve this, we need to change this. So how should we change in this current political context? So one of the solutions might be we should start the bottom-up NDC process, where indigenous people can decide their own climate target, and indigenous people have a chance to negotiate at the global climate arena. So the reason we are advocating for the bottom-up NDC process is because having indigenous people included in this climate change mitigation process will give us opportunity to identify the real causes of emissions, the main drivers, what is happening on the ground, and the opportunity where we can actually achieve on the ground. And it can also give the indigenous community a sense of ownership, actually, to set more realistic and more achievable target and the revisions of the NDC. So, as the international organizations, WWF, we have been supporting indigenous people and local community in the country. And some of our support may include the recognition of indigenous lands and territory, which is very much important and which is very much essential to start this movement. So we are supporting the indigenous people to identify, or we call it the ICCA, and to prepare the conservation area management planning for those ICCA. And we are also supporting a lot of community-led restoration initiatives inside the country. So we are also providing a series of capacity building training, particularly on the advocacy capacity of the local CSOs and indigenous people, in order to give them, in order to empower them a chance to discuss in the international climate negotiation process, not only in the country, but also at the global level. So another type of support that we are providing in the country is indigenous people and CSO. They require a safe space to express their challenges and their targets or their ambitions. So this is really important, and this is why we need to highlight the indigenous people to bring them to the international stage, to let them speak their challenges and the targets. Another support that we are providing right now is the technical support, especially to identify their own emission targets, to identify their own challenges, what they are facing currently right now, and of course to provide them technical support, how to achieve and how to implement those targets with their own, which they have been set by themselves. And not last but not the least, what our speaker has mentioned, the most important is the funding. So currently, most of the climate funding are going through from the International Climate Fund to the government, and there's a very little chance for the indigenous community and CSO to get access to the Global Climate Fund. So it is important not only for WWF but also all the other international organizations in the country to help them, the local CSOs and community, to access those international climate funds so that they will be able to implement their own target, but at the same time they will also get support for the livelihood challenges that they may face for implementing those targets. So in conclusion, even though the current challenges that we are facing, there are so many things we can implement in the country, and as one of the last remaining big environmental organization in Myanmar, WWF is committing to continue supporting our CSO, indigenous people, and local community in this movement. So thank you very much. Santi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Piso, for reassuring the WWF contribution to the Myanmar and the indigenous people. So on that note, I really would like to open the floor if there is any question from the floor or from the online. But okay, I got one question from the online, and especially I want to ask the IPs and our panelists over here in terms of what is the immediate next step for the IPs and LCs to involve or to contribute on the climate resilience or mitigation target setting? So what are your immediate steps in terms of how you contribute towards the climate adaptation and mitigation target back home? So your immediate steps. So can you comment on that particular point?
The immediate step that we can do is that we already have long-standing our indigenous knowledge that we can collect those knowledge and we can contribute, which is also an open space at the IPLC platform at the moment. And another thing is that people may come and go to indigenous people community for different conservation purpose and action needed. But indigenous people, they never leave their community. Whatever faces challenges, whatever crisis with them, they are there staying at the together with the forest, together with the river and the sea. Every places they settle, they never move away from there, and they are the one who take care of those natural resources, because everything they one is all their livelihood is connected to it. They have strong connection between the land and their spiritual value and the way they live. So they can be part of taking care of the biodiversity and forest, which is important part of mitigation, together with the knowledge they have on it. That's I want to answer.
Do you want to add some more points or?
The most important thing is that, as I already mentioned, that the authority, the stakeholder needs to aware of the consequences, and they have to support, and they should not block how community and indigenous people are conserving their forests by their own traditional method. We have to encourage, and we have to promote, and we have to protect the indigenous traditional way of conserving by themselves. This is very important. Yeah.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Piso, for you.
Yep, thank you very much. So the immediate stuff that we need to do is, the first one to raise the awareness of the importance of NDC for the indigenous community. So I like to highlight what we have discussed before. Indigenous people are the ones who are most vulnerable to the climate change impact. And they are having the least voice in the climate change negotiation because of the limited awareness. So our next step should be to improve that awareness regarding the importance of NDC and to provide a safe space where they can discuss and where they can express their need and their challenges. Thank you.
Friends in the audience, we have some foods and drinks, but please feel free to take that. But I'm getting a lot of questions, so maybe I would pose a second question that came over here, which talks about how much assessment and research can be done for climate change issue for indigenous and the local people. So can anybody in the panelists want to highlight that in terms of research assessment?
Yeah, we have done since the first time we engaged in COP. For me, I started engaging in COP since COP 20. So since then, what happened on the ground? We also trying to conduct assessment, and every year we have ongoing discussion with indigenous leader on their changes, the increased impact that they are facing with climate change. Although there are some times that we might have some scientific way of approving it or a scientific way of evidence collection will be not sufficient. However, for community level, they keep doing assessment of the changes happening there, and some of our work are also published, and you can also access online as well. Even when facing with the COVID-19, we continue communication and conducting assessment in all possible way, because we don't want to miss with lack of, or we don't want to have gap in information, because we also know that evidence-based voices is stronger as well. So even with the COVID time, we conduct assessment and research on indigenous people, customary land tenure management, and also we have done assessment on indigenous people adaptation and mitigation. What are the challenges facing on the ground, and what is their current action, things like that. We have done. However, there is still a lot of work needed more, because like a few group of people cannot do the bigger picture of things that is happening at the national level, and that's why we say that we have done a lot, but we still need gap, because there are increasing needs to understand more about the community and also link up to what is discussing here. So in terms of scientific data and official data will be shortage, but in terms of indigenous people, their actual experiences are documented until now. Yeah, thank you.
Do you want to add?
Yeah, as in the recommendation also mentioned that there should be more documentations and research that highlight and show what's the consequences at the grassroots level are really happening, to show up as evidence to the international community and other CSO and NGO. It's very important, because it is the proof. No one cannot reject the proof. That's why it is important, and we encourage indigenous researcher, the indigenous science to be able to conduct, and to be able to conduct the indigenous researcher and other scientists. It is the important thing is they need funding, they need support, they need financial, they need help from the stakeholder. So let's support the researcher who want to do the climate change related issue that happening to indigenous people. So thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this remark. I think our event is really going well, and I got another question, so I would like to pose this question as the last question. So it's about the food security. So how is the food security in Myanmar if agricultural lands are being affected by climate change? So I would really ask, so we mean on that.
Yes, that is becoming bigger and bigger issue now, facing with all the challenges. Every farmer who plant paddy field for 1 acres of land, they lose around 1 lakh jat for the land they planted because everything they need to prepare for the raw material and all the labor, and even if they are the one themselves planting this area of land, after all, when it's come out, because of climate change this year, they have planted, but there is no enough rain, so they have to plant again. So this year is take two times of their time to plant it, and when the crops they get to for the yield they get is very much lesser compared to last year. So then. So every effort they have taken and input for the farming, they lost. So those farmers who have 10 acres of land only trying to plant for 3 acres so that he still have food for family to eat, but for market or other thing, they don't want to because it's a loss. They already know it, and it's not this year, but this year is more severe. But since a few years ago, they started facing like this. So for farmer, if we have to think rice as cash crop, then it's no more profit. Just to keep farming so that there is food for people to eat, but how much they can be resilient for this kind of loss every year, we are not sure, and there is no action and measure taken for them to overcome like this situation. This is just one example. For community practicing shifting cultivation, also there are community who cannot reach up to the market. No, they are staying very remotely, and also with political instability, they cannot travel. So like people have to do more shifting cultivation area because for 1 sack of rice bag to bring to their community is double, triple money cost even with the value of rice. The rice may be a certain price, even very higher price for rice, but to bring that up to reach to their community from market to home, also the cost cannot be emergent. So for the community rely on shifting cultivation, they also continue their paddy field in their shifting cultivation area for self-sufficient economy, but not for selling to the market like that. So, but there are also community who cannot plant anything anymore because they are displaced. So you can imagine all of those situations happen, and the food security, I just give example with the main food that we need, not rice. There are many other pressure in many other food. So overall, we will have a big problem in coming year. And there are more data in WFP, no? They are doing some assessment on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very comprehensive from the Myanmar email, but I would like to highlight more about the consequences of the current food crisis in Myanmar. So at this moment, like more than 80% of the country people are under the poverty, and they are facing challenges in relation to the food. And what happened in response to these challenges? So most of the people, they have to enter into the forest as their last resort of employment. So the only source of food where they can get the forest. And you can imagine that may have a lot of impact to the forest. And as a WWF, what we are currently doing is that we are trying to support in order to improve the food security of the community. But at the same time, we also set a very ambitious target to restore the degraded forest in the country. So we have set at least 50,000 hectares of forest has to be restored in the next 3 years. So if the moment that we started this initiative, we have to care about the indigenous people. We have to care about the local community. So please join us in our movement. Please join with us in our journey to support the people of Myanmar, and of course to protect the environment that we have protected in the country. Thank you very much. Who would like to highlight?
Just want to add one positive thing. We see so many negative things happening with us, but one positive thing is community who use natural fertilizer are now spreading their knowledge to those farmers who use chemical fertilizer in the past and can no longer afford for it. They started using natural fertilizer, which is better. But this thing is the way people helping each other, and we are also helping facilitate among those different people as well by providing those awareness on natural fertilizer, which is like also supporting for climate action as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting that. And we are almost finishing. We have just a 3 minute more time. So maybe I will just to ask all the panelists just 2 words what you want to relay for our audience today. For me is bottom up NDCs. So maybe I will ask the panelists the 2 words what you want to relay today.
Allow me to express 2 sentences instead of 2 words. So the International Development Agency should have the indigenous policy. That's very important, whatever they do the support. And another thing is, without the participation of indigenous people, global climate change movement will not be possible. Thank you.
I just want to say action and emergency.
I just want to say, don't forget IPLC. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I think we just run away with our time, but we can have a individual Q&A. So some of my takeaway is that the IPs and LC needs greater support, not only from the financial, but also more from the capacity building, inclusiveness, and also the bottom of the NDC process. And it needs to be, it is really critical that the engagement of the IPs and the LCs needs to be at all level, not from the grassroots level, but from all even from the national level, and they are really committed and they really want to engage, but we definitely need support from the international as well in terms of financial capacity building, technology support, and much more. So I really enjoy our discussion today. Thank you so much for the panelists, and we just run away with our time, but I hope it was a very fruitful, I would say, even at least for me, and I hope to the all audience, and I really welcome all our audience to have to raise applause to our audience, and please join for our some food and drinks. And thank you so much.